Thank you for listening to the Kyle and Tim podcast, where we have authentic conversations that help cultivate a better understanding of ourselves, our guests, and the world we live in. This podcast is about our guests, getting to know them, their backgrounds, experiences, thoughts, and ideas. We really appreciate you listening. Before we introduce our next guest, we'd like to introduce a few of our sponsors that help make this podcast possible.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Mountain Mule Transportation, located here in Bozeman, Montana. Mountain Mule is a private SUV and truck service, offering chauffeur services in all of southwest Montana. Whether it's your next skiing, hunting, or fishing trip, early morning or late night trips to and from Bozeman Airport, as well as weddings and private parties. No matter the occasion, Mountain Mule will get you there safely and on time. To learn more, visit mountain-mule.com and book today.
Hello, my name's Robert Lester. I'm here on the Kyle and Tim podcast, where we covered everything from my journey down the Columbia River from Montana to the ocean to fighting and a little bit about life and life in Butte, Montana. Thanks for listening.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's talk about your film coming up.
Yeah.
Give us a background. What's going on with that? I've seen it on Instagram, like a couple of little short clips and whatnot. It looks like a really cool adventure. Give us a background on that.
Yeah. So, pretty much we canoed from Montana to the ocean, took 52 days and made kind of a film about it as we went, a little bit following the adventure, some about, some of the environmental issues that the river's facing along the way. And just kind of a mix of those two things is the film. It's called the Columbia River Canoe Project.
Yeah. So you went down the Clark?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So the Clark Fork of the Columbia River, we met the main body of the Columbia in Canada and then took that to the ocean.
Okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yep. So you went up and then came down. That's so okay. I hadn't thought about that. I guess I would have thought you would have went just naturally. I was thinking the Coeur d'Alene River, but that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's where the highway follows, so that's what you think about,
Yeah.
When you're going like driving out that way, you go through Coeur d'Alene, so it feels like it heads that direction, but no. So we kind of did a big loop around that, went up to like Sandpoint, Idaho, and then looped all the way around the Spokane, Coeur d'Alene area, and then all the way across Washington and down.
Cool. Okay, so where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so, it was something that I kind of always wanted to do when I was a little kid. My grandparents lived out on the Jefferson River, so the other side of the Continental Divide. But when we were growing up, me and my cousin would often build these like little wooden boats, and we'd float them down the river all summer, and we'd grab them, and then at the end of the summer, we'd put our contact information in them, and we'd float them down the river, right? And we just loved this idea that somebody in Louisiana was going to get back to us.
Okay.
Of course, nobody ever did, right? Like I'm sure it didn't even make it, more than 2 bends down the river before it got hung up. But it inspired just this love of, using the rivers to travel, and this idea that that's how Native peoples and Lewis and Clark and, it was the easiest way to travel was to use these rivers. And so with that, it was something that I kind of put away. And I'm, these days I'm actually known more as a canoeer, but to me, my passions are more in the skiing and climbing area. That's where I am like more proficient, believe it or not. But, put that away and then never really touched it until a little bit, actually, when I was in college here at MSU. I would be in this giant physics lecture hall. And in that lecture hall, I loved physics, but I just would sit there all day long and be like, okay, whatever. So I'd plan out my skiing and climbing trips, bust open my laptop, do it on Google Earth instead of, paying attention like I should have been. And I ran out of these skiing and climbing trips, did them all that I had them all that I wanted to do planned. And so then I actually sat down and planned this whole trip, from Butte to the ocean. And then again, kind of tucked it away and hadn't looked at the files in years.
Okay. I gotta pause here.
Yeah.
So I'm, how old are you?
I'm 27 now.
Okay, so I'm 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I didn't have a laptop, and really most people didn't have a laptop like in class.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to think of like, okay, what would it be like when I was in college? And I can't blame you for like zoning out, and like planning out all your fun trips. Like that sounds awesome. So you were literally in class and you're like, dude, I'm going to plan out this trip on this canoe.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like I said, because before we'd plan out a lot of our ski mountaineering trips. So where we'd go up on Google Earth, research it, what it was going to do, where we'd camp if we were going to do an overnighter, that sort of thing, and then come back down. And then I literally ran out of all those trips. I had them all planned that I wanted to do. And so I just planned this whole canoe project trip.
Yeah.
Way back. It would have been 10 years ago now.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. That long ago.
Yeah. My first semester in college.
Yeah.
And so then we basically would go in and I'd put out campsites and where obstacles in the river were and that sort of thing. And then ended up with just these, Excel spreadsheets and Google Drive files and all these things that I tucked away again, like I said. And, 8 years later, I end up talking to a friend of mine, and this, again, it's a long story, but he's a quadriplegic kid.
Okay.
He has he's been quadriplegic for about 20 years now. I've known him for about 15, and he's the most inspiring person you've ever met. Like, the kid always has a positive attitude. He has a ton of projects, amazing things. His name's Tyler Stosich, and just incredible person. And I've never seen him have a bad day, and I don't think I would have that kind of strength. And so he was asking what my next trip was. And I was like, I don't know, man, don't have anything planned yet, and like, but I told him, I always wanted to canoe to the ocean, and he just lit up. He was so stoked, so excited. And so that meant when he was just so excited about it and said, I wish that was a trip I could do.
Yeah.
That meant it was a trip I had to do.
Yeah.
And so that was October, and we started, I busted open those old files and that sort of thing, started emailing every canoe company in the country, and we were in the water by May. So
cool.
All these different ski trips you're doing, who's doing a lot of them with you?
So my friends from college, one of them from high school, but just MSU, kids.
Anyone who was down.
Well, yeah, and mostly it was 3 or 4 of us who'd go on a lot of stuff, but just my college roommates pretty much. So,
who was the main accomplice with this canoe trip?
Oh, so that's something different. So I had a few of those type of guys who were going to go with me. Right. And then they ended up with some like last minute issues where they couldn't go. And so I'm like, for better words, like up a creek without a paddle. Right. And it's like 2 weeks before the trip, before my leave date. I have a canoe. I've told these people who was going, all these things. We have the filming all set up, all that stuff. And now I don't have a partner. And so I'm at a family reunion, and I was just talking to my cousin saying, oh yeah, like I'm pretty screwed. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. And he said he'd go. And so he was 18 years old. He had just graduated high school, had never been in a canoe before, never been on an adventure.
Good for him.
Only car camped, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so then he hops into what is, the biggest adventure of his lifetime by far, and has to learn it all. And that's like, we truly thought we'd have more of a film that was an environmental film, like focusing on that stuff. And it ends up a lot more about the adventure, because you get to watch Braxton, who's my cousin, grow up, in an hour. You sit there and you watch this kid learn so many lessons and see what life's going to be like for him, outside of this world. But within this world, you see what it's like and how he's growing. And it's pretty amazing. So.
That's awesome.
Were his parents pissed at you for taking him?
No, actually, yeah, exactly. His dad was all for it, really encouraged him, was like, man, this is one of those once in a lifetime opportunities, when are you going to get another chance to go, sort of thing, and really pushed him to go and to make sure that, it was okay and that sort of thing. I think his mom was a little less sure, of course, but they were pretty
Where'd he grow up?
About it. Ogden, Utah, so just north of Salt Lake City.
Cool.
And you said it was like 50 days?
52 days was our total. Yeah. We made it. Spoiler.
Yeah. Awesome. So, and you got all your camping gear in the boat and with you, everything?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a non-supported trip. So we still did have, between the camera guys and we had a sport team and that sort of thing where people would, bring us food. So we didn't have to walk to the nearest grocery store every time or catch and eat all of our food. I always joke that we'd still be out there if that was the case. So it was nice to have a lot of that stuff and a lot of that support. And especially with the a camera crew around.
What is that like? Like, what does a camera crew look like for a trip like that?
Well, so a lot of other people would have like a real production team. I'm a little bit of everything on this. So like I'm the producer. The camera crew is just 4 friends of mine that are, we'd worked on skiing and climbing projects before, and so they're just each coming out, one of them for a week. So sometimes there's nobody, sometimes there are 2 people, but mostly just one of my buddies trying to catch as much as he can and, get as much as we can of the situation.
Yeah. So like you have a buddy showing up like, hey, I can help for this week and I'll follow you from here to here.
Exactly.
And then I got to go back to work or something.
Yeah. Real life's calling, and so then maybe there's a few days, or maybe that the next kid can, it was all about trying to schedule it ahead of time and see, because we don't know where they'd be. So we did where we'd be. Right. So they don't know where they're driving to necessarily. But it was all based just on days and like, hey, drive out towards us on day 13 and stay till day 17. And then, the next guy will hop in on day 18 or day 20 or, et cetera.
That is really cool. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm really lucky that, again, I called these 4 guys and they all said yes and took a chance. And they're the reason we have a film now.
Yeah. That's awesome.
What's your background in videography?
Oh, it's non-existent.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my degree from MSU, a lot of these other guys are MSU film majors, but I'm actually a snow scientist. So my degree's in like avalanches and glaciers and, mountain geography and that sort of thing, snowpacks. But, we do some skiing and climbing advertising. And so that's where my little bit of videography came in, but usually I'm the athlete and not anything behind the camera. So it was a lot of learning on that end of things and figuring it out as we went.
Nice, man. Let's go way back. Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Butte, Montana.
Okay. So, they got a hospital there?
Yeah. Believe it or not, Yeah. So yeah, I was born there, grew up outside of town, like 20 miles.
Where?
Elk Park, if you've ever heard of that. It's
I'll have to look it up.
Not really a town, in between like Butte and Helena, if you were driving to Helena on the interstate.
Brothers, sisters?
No, I'm an only child.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what are your parents like?
Yeah, I always say that my mom taught me how to ski and my dad taught me like how to adventure, but that's like really the truth. My mom was a ski instructor and had a love of skiing that she really gave to me. And then my father, if he was born, a few hundred years ago, would have been a mountain man, like a fur trapper.
Okay.
Like, loves the outdoors, loves to fish and hunt and, spend as much time in nature as he can. And yeah, the mix of those two kind of made me what I am and do now. So,
yeah. What was life like growing up in Elk Park?
It was good. There's not many neighbors or kids around necessarily, but there's a pretty good community up there. Yeah, cold, a lot of snow, long drive into town. But It was always good. Yeah, there's no town or anything like that. It's just kind of people spread apart a ways, but definitely know each other, have like a yearly hay ride and that sort of thing around Christmas. So, yeah.
And you went to school in Butte?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Where would you ski?
Discovery. So I grew up skiing at Disco. Yeah, basically my whole life.
Right on.
Yeah.
How far is that from like Butte?
It's probably, I don't know. It's just outside of Georgetown Lake. So you drive through Anaconda and up there. It takes you about an hour from Butte. It's probably a little under 60 miles to get up there.
Got it.
You still live in Butte now or no?
Yeah, I'm there about half the time and then just kind of gone about half the time. I spend a lot of time in Salt Lake City these days too. But yeah, I don't know that I'm really anywhere all that often right now, especially with the way the film tour has been. I've been kind of all over the country, which has been neat, but also just a little different. So,
what takes you to Salt Lake City?
So those friends he was asking about who are who I went skiing and climbing with, and they got engineering jobs down there, and so that's when I'd go down there to visit them, and then have just kind of built somewhat of a life down there along with that. So it's pretty cool. Great place. Again, world-class skiing and climbing there as well as here. Montana will always be, sorry to jump in like that, but
it's all good.
It's just a funny thing that I think it's hard for people who haven't lived here, or who, especially if they didn't grow up here, to realize that Montana will always be home. If anybody ever asked me where I'm from, I don't right now, but if I moved to Salt Lake City for the rest of my life, I would always say I'm from Montana. That's home,
Yeah, makes sense.
What's something that sticks out about Butte that you don't know unless you're someone that grows up there?
Oh, a lot. I got a lot of good Butte facts. If you want some Butte facts, so Butte was the first town west of the Mississippi to have electricity. So it had electricity before San Francisco. At the time, Butte
that San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly. Butte was.
Everybody thinks San Francisco's all techie.
Yeah. And it was just because Butte was pulling so much copper out of the ground at the time.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You kind of need copper for electricity.
Yeah, exactly. And they're wanting to light not just the city, but mostly the mines. It's way more efficient, way safer. The world's most deadly hard rock mining disaster was in Butte. So that's still to this day, no more people in one incident have died underground than in Butte.
You know what year that was or no?
Off the top of my head. So it was actually, they were stringing electrical cable, and the miners didn't have electric headlamps. They had candles off the front of their head, their helmets. Right. Mm-hmm. And, the flame from the candle touched the, oil soaked cloth that wrapped the wire, and it caught on fire. And that's the Granite Mountain speculator disaster. I want to say right around the turn of the century, 1900s. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things about Butte. A lot of history. The Berkeley Pit, everybody knows about it. It's big, but there's actually 10,000 miles of underground tunnels that are all flooded, connected to it too. So
flooded with water.
Wow. Yeah, all toxic water. Yeah. So pretty interesting.
Did your folks grow up there? Did they move there?
No, they did. Both my parents and my grandparents on both sides all grew up and lived in Butte.
Oh, wow.
So
your grandparents must have been some of the OGs.
Yeah, they were around for sure. So
interesting.
Yeah, it must be a wild transition just to see what's happening in that town. And
I think in some ways it's different. It's growing, but not as fast as Bozeman is in some ways. So it's different. It's one of those deals with Butte where the more it changes, the more it stays the same, it feels like. So it's, it really is a town. It gets, sometimes a reputation for being a bit rough and tumble and things like that. But it's really also a place of, great people where people will be incredibly kind and love to help you out and do things for you and that sort of thing. So
what do you know about it being called Butte, America?
Yeah. So no. So the reason is because, Butte was, really in existence and thriving before Montana was a state. So, we were actually,
it was a territory.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't even the Montana territory. It was the Idaho territory for a while first. Yeah. So, I believe it's the Idaho or the Wyoming territory, but anyway, so it's, they're writing back home to Ireland mostly, but anywhere in the old country.
Butte, America.
Yeah. When you're addressing where you're at, you're in Butte, America, because you didn't put Butte, the Montana territory, et cetera. So
that makes a lot of sense. What other cool Butte facts you got, dude?
I'm trying to think.
What about Tim, Montana?
Okay. So here's my,
I don't know who that is.
I almost went into this a minute ago. Okay. So, Tim Montana right now is he's a recording artist, was in country music for a long time, is now in harder rock music.
Okay.
Very successful, has a few albums out there. I think his most recent song hit I don't know if it's the rock or the hard rock top.
What? I've never heard
5.
this.
He's kind of Americana.
Yeah, it's hard to necessarily give him a genre, but his most recent album had a song that made Billboard charts for rock music.
Okay. Sing it.
Yeah. I can sing some of his older stuff, but that's like some screamo. He's very talented.
Okay.
But the funniest part is he actually also grew up in Butte. I mean, in Elk Park.
Oh, really?
So he's from Butte, but he grew up in Elk Park.
How old is he?
He's probably your age, probably
Okay.
10 years older than
Okay,
I
you
am.
don't know him.
Oh yeah, I do.
Oh, okay.
but the funniest part is that like he grew up like kind of not all that far from me in a place that maybe has 40 people.
Okay.
And so,
Wow.
I just always think it's funny that, like I'm like in a small film and that sort of thing. But like, if I lived most places with 40 people, I'd be like probably the most famous person. But I'm like by far and away the second most famous person from this tiny place. Got it. And it's because, he's been so successful and he's so generous, so kind. He's a really cool person.
Cool.
They just bought the Wise River Club, moved back up from Nashville. He's played with ZZ Top a lot. And so those guys are involved.
ZZ still around?
One of them is. I can't think of his name.
It's all right. One of the ZZ Top brothers.
Yeah. But is still alive, and I should know his name. But he's investor in the Wise River Club now, and so
Is the Wise River Club in Butte? No,
it's out towards the Big Hole River.
Oh,
it's like, it's one of those places that's been a bar and a lodge type of place for a long time.
Okay,
so yeah,
it's funny you say that. I just talked to the people at the Wise River Club like a week or two ago.
Yeah,
my business, we do private transportation. And I just reached out to him kind of off the cuff, say, hey, I don't know if you have a lot of clients that fly into Bozeman getting out there. They're like, yeah, all the time. So we just exchanged info. So hopefully we'll be driving out there this summer to check it out.
Yeah, you should. I mean, even if you just get a chance, great fishing out there, beautiful place to come check out. Even if you don't want to stay, just want to have a beer. They have great food there now too. They've really redone the place. It had gotten pretty worn down, and now they bring in, people he knows. Tim has incredible connections with people like at Traeger and that sort of thing as one of his sponsors. So they'll bring people up and, who are world-class smoke cooks and, barbecue that does not belong in Montana and, cook and that sort of thing. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there an Evel Knievel connection with?
Yeah. So
Butte?
Evel Knievel's from Butte as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Probably our Butte's
who would have known?
Yeah.
Dude.
So pretty wild. Yeah. And then, so for a long time, there were Evel Knievel days growing up. And there was like a festival where all the, Harley guys, it was like maybe like a little Deadwood type of thing, Sturgis.
People would start doing motorcycle jumps and shit.
Oh, all kinds. I mean, it was all kinds of stuff. Very professional riders, and so there's a lot of good riders from Butte. Like Keith Sayers is a rider who rides with Monster and stuff like that, dirt bikes, and does a lot of great jumping and cool stuff like that. But yeah, Evel Knievel's from Butte. Yeah, trying to think who else.
Yeah, same thing with my company. I drove somebody out there because he passed away like a few years ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago now. But
somebody drove out there. There was some memorial or some service going out there, and he flew out and just needed a lift to Butte. And I drove the guy out. He was a nice guy, but he knew, like, he was telling me probably half the questions I just asked you was stuff he was telling me about on that drive.
Yeah,
that was a couple of years ago, so it's kind of faint.
No, yeah, it's pretty cool, and Butte does have a lot of history, in a lot of different ways, whether it's good or bad. The U.S.'s longest operating, legal prostitution house, ran in Butte. The Dumas brothel ran into the late 80s. So
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. The funniest story though is they say that it was the best place if you were a kid at Butte High School. It's like 2 blocks from Butte High to the Dumas brothel. And they said if you were the first kid to make it there with like a fundraiser, that the girls would like buy you out of your raffle tickets. Like you wanted to be the first kid who made it up there. Cause those even though they were, ladies of ill repute, that they would, support the kids in the town.
They're just working women.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So,
I mean, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
The oldest running Chinese restaurant, the Peking, is in Butte. It was a whorehouse originally and then turned to a Chinese restaurant. They write a lot of articles in like the New York Times about it often. But
yeah, I mean, if you think about like if you go back, whatever, probably 100 years or so. The first off, the world was so different that I think what was quote unquote acceptable was completely different than what we think of today. And so it's hard to like look back, and I think it's unfair actually to look back at society and say, oh well, they shouldn't have done this and they shouldn't have done like, well, like it was a long time ago, and so the world was different. And by the way, like you're in a mining town, and quite frankly, like the biggest mining town in the country. I don't know. So I don't have like a bad view of Butte. A lot of people do. I'm like, it is what it is. And it's part of history.
Yeah, and it really is like that. Like I said, the majority of the copper in the United States came, and a big chunk of it for the whole world came.
I mean, isn't it still the biggest copper mine in the world?
No, Kennecott is a little bigger, and there's a mine in Chile that's a little bigger. But we also stopped running it for a long time, So, yeah. But it's for a long time, a lot of the world's and the majority of the U.S.'s copper came from Butte. So, like that was pushing progress, but it also, comes with scars in some ways.
That's right.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a lot of good movies about Butte or any?
Historical documentaries, some, the new 1923 is filmed there, but it's set in Bozeman. It's supposed to be Bozeman, but they're, they used all the old buildings that are still from that 1920s era. That's when a lot of those buildings were still built, and town doesn't look that much different than it did then. So it's easy for them to film there.
I wish I knew that when I watched that show.
Yeah, I should keep an eye out. I'm in the first episode. I went.
Oh, really?
I was an extra. And I was like, I got to check this out. And then I never went back. I was like, that was the most boring 8-hour day. I'm happy I went once, but
that was the first season, second season?
First season, very first shot when they're showing like they do a big pan and have all the people, but yeah.
Nice.
And
was it Butte was one of the biggest cities in America at one point?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, it would be talking about Chicago, Minneapolis, Butte, San Francisco. Yeah. So, it was pretty wild. It was also a place again, like
tons of like wealth.
Well, and I was going to say tons of, a lot of wealth and a lot of very poor people.
Yeah, right.
So, they said in general, like the average bed, as a miner, you didn't usually, if you had a family, you might've had a company house later, or you might've had a house, but generally most of the miners were single. And so they'd sleep in a boarding room, and your bed never got cold. So they say that you
cycle in, cycle out
8 hours, so that you had 8 hours in your bed. And then you had, probably a 12-hour shift, and then you had 4 hours to probably go to the bar or, probably go visit some of those ladies we talked about earlier. And so, that was
go get your fundraising.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's just like what life looked like for those people, and like it was a tough life, and they got paid often and spent a lot of it because you didn't know if you were going to come out. There were not just big accidents, there were a lot of little accidents and a lot of, that sort of thing. So it's an interesting, fascinating place. A lot of it too, like there was tons of smog in town, like grass didn't grow in Butte, they say. So you'd paint your, the bricks in your yard green if you were wealthy so that you could seem like you had a lawn.
Yeah. I've seen some of the like photos of what Butte was like. You couldn't even it was wild. There was like huge black cloud over the city, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly right. They had 13 smelters. So they'd take the ore out of the ground right there, crush it up and melt it down all right in town.
You probably died so early.
Definitely.
Because, you know what I mean? Like you think about how bad that is for your lungs, just like walking around town.
Well, and in the mines, a lot of guys had silicosis.
Yeah.
So that get the black lung. So
yeah,
and you got a leg in the film industry. You should get a hold of Taylor Sheardon. That sounds like a great TV show. Just like the life in Butte and like.
Well, and I think some people.
You said it here first. Dude. It's going to happen.
All right. Well, you got to get a hold of him. You're already an extra. You
pretty much.
You probably got his main. You got his main line, right?
But in some ways, I think people. I know it was a spinoff and a fictional story, and like wanting to make up the Yellowstone
Yeah.
journey. But a lot of people in Butte were a little upset about that, that you're like, you have such incredible stories happening right there.
Yeah.
And like, why even need to fictionalize something else? Why not tell the story where you're shooting? And like, there's both sides of that. Like, again,
Yeah, that's what when you were saying it, I'm like, that seems like a cool story. Just what a crazy time to be alive.
Yeah, right.
To live through everything you just described.
Yeah, actually, it would be really wild if somebody, they're going to dramatize it. So let's just leave it the way they're going to put it. Like if they dramatized, but like had some realistic features about like if you really think about like what was life like in Butte for, I don't know, probably a 50 to 75 year period. But even if you just took a 10-year period, what was Butte like? And you could have like 5 different characters and you could run simultaneously a show of like, what was your life like? What was mine? And like, maybe I'm the miner or the rich guy. Of course I would be, right? Who else would I be?
Yeah.
And then I don't know who you'd be. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Maybe you'd be the miner and Tim would be, working at the whorehouse. I don't know. But you could kind of show it from like 5 different angles. That would be crazy. Like, what was life like in Butte during that 10, call it 1890 to 1900.
Yeah. And, I think kind of some of that stuff that, again, why people would suggest that it's a good idea too, is because not all of it has to be that dramatized, because so many interesting things
crazy.
happen. Yeah. Like for real, like, there's also we talked about the mining disaster, but there's a giant warehouse disaster that was in like the 1890s before electricity. And so they had like this warehouse caught on fire, right? And they show up, it's all wood buildings. The firefighters show up and they had stored dynamite in the warehouse. So the dynamite goes off in the first warehouse, basically wipes out all the firefighters. The volunteers show up in the second deal and are trying to fight the second. And then so 2 more subsequent like explosions happened. They had stored 30 times the legal dynamite in one of the warehouses, and then about 3,000 times the legal amount of dynamite in the other one. And so like they were throwing train wheels to like Anaconda. And like there's a story of a 16-foot saw blade that got tossed like 20 some miles to some guy's house in Rocker, and like it broke the shockwave broke every window in town, they say.
Yeah, so if you think about that, like that was such a wild time, like where they didn't have these engineering practices in place, right? So
they had them. It's just that they're not the guys who are making the money don't care.
Sure. I guess what I'm getting at is like at some point, like those things were being developed, right? Like all the structural like building codes now, like they were being developed during those times, right? And it's kind of like as society learned these things, they were being put in place. But like anyway, it's just an interesting time. I would imagine, like talk about like wild west, like legit wild west.
Yeah, in like the Wild West in the industrial era,
right?
Type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like literally a convergence of the Industrial Revolution happening at the same time. The Wild West is like thriving.
Exactly.
Yeah. Damn. Actually, what a fucking crazy ass time to be alive. That would be wild.
Definitely. Yeah. Lucky that we're not.
That's cool that you're from Butte.
It's not all bad. It's not all bad.
Okay, so why don't you, dude, you should make a movie.
Yeah,
hell yeah, let's do it.
Believe it or not, I might have one movie, more in the outdoor documentary, tell about adventures, than I am interested in, narrative pieces. But I think your idea is wonderful.
Everybody evolves. Everybody evolves.
It's funny you say that though. In my head, I don't have a lot of bad connotations in my head about Butte. Like, it seems cool to me. Like, I grew up in a very small farm town on the other side of the country, but I'm like, yeah, that's like, it's a hardworking town. Like, it's got some crazy history. When my mother's come out here, her and her boyfriend went there, and I think they did some underground tours and stuff, and like they think it's one of the coolest cities out here. Yeah, like when I think of it, I'm like, yeah, it sounds cool.
I want to go back in the summer and do it.
As we're talking about it, I'm like, man, I want to go back, and because I know there's some really cool history, like this historical districts down there and stuff downtown.
Yeah. And I think, again, that has changed. It's not for people who aren't from here, but, I think when you think about it, right, so Butte became kind of like a living ghost town as the pit goes, right? We're not sending guys underground. Instead, we can mine above ground, so we need a lot less jobs.
Yeah.
And so that sort of thing, a lot of people left town, and so that's why it's kind of, even to today, half deserted, smaller than it was. Again, in 1900, there were over 100,000 people there, and it was a huge
at
town.
At some point, there was like 200,000 people there.
Yeah, exactly. And now there's about 30.
Yeah.
So, like it's a shell of what it once was.
It's crazy. I think some of the buildings are like 8 stories.
Oh,
they're all
over.
And they're all brick.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's a tall ass brick building.
Yeah.
Especially in a place that has earthquakes.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like with that, then, again, later there was some downturn with that. And then later, they shut down the mines for a while. They shut down the Berkeley pit, which filled up before they started the Continental pit. And, it became really a pretty empty place and a rough and tumble place. People nowadays think of Evel Knievel a lot of times as just like a jumper. But before that, it was like that was somebody who would fight a lot, and there was a lot of street fights and that sort of thing. And so that's how Butte got that reputation. And it carried on, I think, to when I was a kid, that's like what people would think of town and that sort of thing. And even, like kids who grew up other places, like had that idea of town. But again, as more people come to Montana, Montana in general is growing like crazy. It's not that same feeling that, once was around.
Mm-hmm.
Places like hold an energy though too, like if it was like crazy and like imagine the energy going on there in the early 1900s.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's going to kind of live on there in a way and get passed down.
Well yeah. And when your grandparents tell you like, hey, don't go to Butte, like it was, rough and tumble place. And then like, then your parents are like, well, I'm not so sure, like that sort of thing. And, again, some of that reputation, the people are incredible, but some of it was well earned for times. There were people who took a lot of pride in fighting in bars and things like that, casually people who were from other places. And
I mean, I would imagine that like, people have like this connotation about New York City. It's like if you're going to, it's like, what's the saying about New York City of like, you can make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere. It's probably at the time, it was probably like, if you can make it in Butte, you can fucking make it anywhere. Something like that, right? It's probably like a super intense place for a while.
Well, and think about, like as you're, really poor, your family sent you back money so that you could come here from the old country to Butte. And then also that there's, there aren't many women or families or reasons to keep the place nice. It's like, it's a, it's a industrial working town, where the bars and, whorehouses are popular places and fighting is something to do for fun.
Sounds like every movie and TV show I watch.
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Why wants this to be a TV show?
But that reputation does live on for maybe longer than it should in some ways, then it was really rough. And then later there were still people who wanted to keep it rough and keep that reputation and that sort of thing. But then there's also at the same time, people who were growing up there and, incredibly kind and like, but again, I think in a lot of ways it has lost that. People don't, especially people who didn't grow up here don't necessarily think about it the way, that other people did or that we did or we were told when we were growing up, and like, again, Butte has a tendency to lean into those sort of things, like we used to chant, like, how you had chants? What were chants in school when you were in like high school?
I don't really remember, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right. Like, but it was probably something like, go Hawks, or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Ours was like, we used to like be so proud that we had the, dirtiest water that we would chant like dirty water. That was like, other places would try and be like chanted at you. And then, we loved it. That was our thing in high school. Like at a basketball game, like all the Butte kids, somebody else.
The water we drink is poisoning us. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so like, that's just a good feeling on like, it was about being tough and like, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
We went on a long Butte tangent. What about St. Patrick's Day?
Oh yeah. So again, maybe where a lot of that same reputation was earned, but one of the bigger St. Patrick's Days in the country. My friends make fun of me because we always were told it's like the third largest. And that might be by like percentage wise, but I don't know about this year. It was busy this year, but last year it was on Saturday. There were about, again, the town has about 30,000 people. There were over 15,000 people just at the parade.
Mhm.
So a lot of people, there was a huge Irish population for a long time. It's joked to be the 33rd county of Ireland is Butte. And so a lot of connections there, and, a lot of people from Ireland came to Butte. Places were called, neighborhoods were called Dublin Gulch or Corktown or that sort of thing. And St. Paddy's Day has lived on through that. A lot of people are very proud to be Irish and from Butte. And with that, a lot of people are proud to be Irish for a day in Butte, whether you're from there or not. So
Is it pretty crazy?
it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's mostly just busy. A lot of people don't make it maybe much past the parade. Parade's at noon, and max drunkenness is probably about like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Yeah.
And then, whenever you're drunk around that time, you've been getting after it.
Yeah, exactly. So.
All right. Well, let's jump back into you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you said you're not, despite your recent canoe fame, you said you're kind of more known for being a climber, and what else?
Skier. So skiing is what I'm best at for sure.
So like, you got into that young. When did you get into climbing?
Not till just before I came to college.
Okay.
So I'm not near as good of a climber. I love it. I say climber because it's easy for people to understand as far as like rock climbing, and we do rock climb quite a bit. I'm not, I'm a good rock climber, but not like world class by any means. But we climb a lot of mountains as well and ski downs. So.
Okay, yeah. So you're climbing in like the winter and in the spring.
Yeah, like we ice climb a bunch. I'm a better ice climber than I'm a rock climber for sure. That sort of thing.
Okay.
So,
you do a lot of stuff around here.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah. Highlight especially.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Ice climbing wise, Highlight is as good as it gets. It's some of the best in the world. And, like getting to learn how to climb here was really cool for that reason. We'd spend a lot of, mornings before class, nights out there learning to ice climb, and just love it. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And Highlight really is pretty much as good as it gets in the whole world. So.
Nice.
So you said you planned out all these different skiing adventures in college. What does your life growing up look like to get you to be the kind of guy that plans these adventures right when you get to school?
Yeah. So, really it happened because we'd plan those adventures. And the reason I learned to rock climb better was because we wanted to ski harder stuff. So, like skiing was always my biggest passion. And so got to college, met some other guys who are in the same boat, and, we just want to ski harder stuff. We go ski Big Sky, we ski everything there, and it's great. It's incredible. But like you then are in Big Sky and you're looking across the valley, and there's an amazing line over there. And so, we want to go ski that. So you got to learn how to be ski safely in the backcountry. And then, we're skiing more of that sort of stuff. So it's like, well, we better become better rock climbers because I want to ski something that I can get to only by climbing, and that sort of deal more and more. And just, then you start to fall in love with the climbing of the mountains and the climbing, rock climbing and ice climbing itself as well. But for me, it all started just out of a love to ski and wanting to ski harder and harder things.
Mm-hmm.
And your mom would take you a lot when you were a kid?
Yeah, tons. She said it was easiest even when I was little. She could just throw me in the car, and so that's what we did on the weekends when I was little. She just throw me in the car. I'm 4 years old, boot me up, and then we go skiing, so we'd go tons and tons.
You ever done any heli skiing?
No, I've never been lucky enough. These days, it's pretty prohibitively expensive to heli ski. Sadly, it used to be, there's stories back in the day of like going up to Alaska and paying for like $50 heli rides in the Chugach. But these days, it's pretty much... it's pretty expensive. So unless you're doing some like filming or something like that, or you're willing to shell out the cash, we're mostly climb up, ski down people.
We should introduce him to Tyler.
Tyler, which
downtown
one?
Here with the sauna.
Oh yeah, we should.
He's like, I think he's like a couple of years older than you, but like he's got a crazy story and was working in Alaska for a while on crab boats, but like really big climber, and just like, he definitely has some connections in Alaska for different stuff like that. He was talking about like guy with the plane and stuff.
Yeah,
That's
we should.
cool.
We'll connect you guys via email.
Cool.
We did a podcast with him, and so you can
Check it out.
You can listen to that. He's a crazy, interesting dude, and we should check in with him. He's about to
Open his shop.
He's about to open his.
He's opening a Russian Banya downtown in Bozeman.
Wow.
Do you
That's
know
awesome.
much about them?
I know what it is, but that's about it.
Yeah, so he's opening a super, super cool bathhouse. It's going to open in May.
Wow,
So it's coming
that's
up.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we should check in with him.
Yeah,
But he's a wild dude. Done a ton of kind of adventures like all over the world. Done some pretty wild stuff. He's injured right now. Was it his Achilles?
Oh yeah, I don't know. He's kind of fucked up when he came in here.
I think he got into trail running the last couple of years, and I think he fucked up his Achilles and had to have it surgically detached and then reattached. And so he's working through that.
So the canoe trip, like what? I mean, the film's going to come out, and it's an hour-long film.
Yeah, it's about an hour.
And when that premieres here.
So I've been a little bit all over the place. It's the Bozeman premiere, so it hasn't shown in Bozeman. It will on Friday, 2 days.
Was it just going to play the one day, or will it keep playing for a while?
No, it'll just play the one day.
And it's at the Ellen.
It's at the Ellen, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I've been all over the country now at this point. So I just got back from Iowa. It pretty much shows. Sometimes it shows for a week, but usually it just shows like one time. So I've go to all the showings, answer people's questions, that sort of thing. So I've been through the Pacific Northwest and all over the place.
So what would you say you do for work?
Yeah, usually that's where I say I'm a climber and skier. We do, a lot of generally video advertising. But for the past 2 years since the canoe trip, it's been mostly my focus has been on that project.
Okay, so let's go back to video advertising in the ski and climbing industry. Like, who are you doing work for?
Yeah, so different like types of companies. So I'm sponsored by like Kesley Skis, and so we'll make advertisements for them, but we'll also make reach out to companies, make advertisements for protein powder companies or things like that. Whether it's us going to them with ideas, or them coming to us and they're looking for something, or we're trying to pitch a project or something like that, and use their branding to try and tell a story and like what we're doing and why excite people, that sort of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
like,
it's fun.
You've taken a hobby and turned it into something that you get paid for.
Yeah, exactly.
That you love. And you're like, cool. Like, see, if you do this cool shit, you should drink this protein powder also.
Yeah, exactly. That type of stuff too. But like I said, for me, I really get interested in like trying to tell a story about whether it's a trip or that sort of thing. But yeah, we've done a little bit of that recently.
Who makes up the story?
I mean, it depends, but usually like if I'm reaching out to a company, I'm going to pitch an idea. So I'll have something like, we haven't had it out yet, but the most recent thing we did, the video's not out yet, but I'm not much of a trail runner. But I got into it a little bit with the film tour because when I was going places, I can't climb and ski, but it's easy to run. And so I ran from sea to summit on the big island of Hawaii. So like 58 miles and like a bit over 14,000 feet uphill.
Uh-huh.
And with that, I call the company and say, hey, this is something I've always wanted to do. It's a big feat. It's something I think we can, make not only look visually pretty, but, tell the story of doing it and make it worth it for you guys.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So you're going to go do something you wanted to do anyway. And you're like, well, I might as well make it cool and get paid for it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
But you'd probably say like a good brand or a good company is going to be telling a story anyway with their brand.
Hopefully. Yeah. And we just want to be a part of that, necessarily like fit this little story into the story they're trying to tell as a brand overall too. Yeah. Right. Like all kinds of different brands are telling different stuff. So, like that's why certain fits are better for certain things. And some, like Kesley Skis or Zeal Optics are a company that have sponsored me for a long time. So they're a little different, but like when we're reaching out with certain ideas, certain companies fit better and, than others. So. When
did you start filming things? When were you like, I'm going to start, like, how did that come about?
I'm in college, right. And we're doing these cool climbing and skiing trips. And with that, it was one of those deals where I mostly wanted to be doing that. Wasn't not enjoying college, but I didn't want to do it as much. So I got it done as fast as I could, and I finished in 3 years. And so I decided I could take a year off and try and climb and ski as much as I could. And with that, mostly at the time we weren't doing videos as much. We were doing pictures, but, see what I could do when we were taking pictures in these cool places and, see what kind of value we could add for a company. And I was going to try for a year. And that was like 6 years ago now. So, it was one of those things that kind of just happened. It was like, take a shot and see what had happened. And at the same time, like, it was an area in which I had to decide to focus on that sort of thing more. At the time I was, fighting and had some dreams there and that sort of thing. But it was one of those deals.
What kind of fighting were you doing?
Both. MMA, like
okay.
Ty and these guys do.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And, one of those deals where for me it was, we're too beat up to do both and couldn't be great at both of them. So which did I want to do and which direction did I want to head, sort of thing.
That reminds me of one of the questions I was told to ask you.
Yeah.
So you're a brown belt in judo?
Yeah.
How many MMA fights do you have?
4.
So the question was from a mutual friend, how does it feel to have 4 MMA fights and never have a judo takedown in any of them?
Yeah. So this is from our buddy Ty, who I lived with. And, I'd teach judo a lot. And it was always my favorite thing. I always wanted a giant throw in a fight, but he has had many more than me and had one before I did, and I never got one. So that's
why you told me to ask that question.
Yeah. He's a stud though. Ty's one of the greater people I've ever met.
What's your guys' story? Where'd you guys meet?
In the gym. So yeah.
Okay. You trained here?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, cool.
I trained before then. And then when I came to college,
nice.
I knew Dietz. You guys call him Coach these days. But,
yeah. That's what he goes by.
Yeah. When he was
either or both. Yeah.
Exactly. But I've known Brian since I was probably like 6 or 7. Going to tournaments when I was little.
Oh, hell yeah.
And so known him forever. And then so when I was coming over here for college, I called him beforehand, said, oh yeah, I'll be by. And so then was helping teach kids class and,
cool.
Teaching adult class and that sort of thing. And met Ty, probably my first day. He had just started training probably 6 months before that.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. And then we ended up living together, all kinds of different stuff. So
yeah, I'm sure you got all kinds of fun stories.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you bond with people who do jiu-jitsu or MMA who you fight with in a way that is, different than other things. Sometimes, climbing and skiing, mountaineering, but anything that has a lot of struggle in it. You don't bond when you go to the ski resort with somebody the same way you do if you bleed with them or if you go suffer in the mountains with them. So
I remember one of my first couple of weeks training there, and that's where I started training was here at Montana MMA. And Brian's like, this is going to be the most intimate thing you ever do in your life outside of intimacy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck? And then you get it. Like you do it for years and there's a bond there that's like, I don't know, like no other bond you're going to have other than like hopefully the one you have with your wife and your immediate family.
Yeah. And again, I think it's just that bond through struggle. When you struggle with someone, day in and day out, and you're getting better and they're getting better and it's suffering too at the same time, that produces something that is different and special and a connection that you are going to have with those people forever,
Mm-hmm. Where'd you fought around here?
Yeah, exactly. I never fought out of the state, but yeah, mostly I preferred to fight in Butte, but I fought a few different other places.
Of course you do.
Well, it's hometown, a lot of people to come cheer you on. So
yeah. I was talking more about just the town has that reputation.
Well, but both, yeah, for sure.
You're like, I'm the baddest mofo in Butte.
Well, yeah. And, Brian used to do a lot more shows back then. So he did, probably 8 to 10 shows a year. So we fought a lot more.
There's fights this weekend here.
Yeah, I know.
Are you going?
I'm going to try and make it back down after. I'm going to be at Ponskin at Big Sky. But
okay.
Yeah.
I'm
nice. Thinking about trying to be there.
So you're, because I know I can't. You said the movie plays Friday here?
Yeah.
What time?
Friday at 7 at the Ellen.
So if someone can't watch it, where can they?
So we're trying really hard to get it on a streaming service. So that's the goal, especially for the summer. We're hoping somebody will pick it up. that's the the dream in some
Mhm.
ways. So we hope to do that.
Let's ask Tyler if he knows anyone. He's kind of connected, right?
Yeah, he might
Yeah.
be.
We'll ask him.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, so that's just what we're working on getting it on. We have some people who are looking at it at those types of places. But if not, eventually it'll be on like YouTube. It might be a while. We're really trying, but if nothing else, people can watch it on YouTube eventually. So yeah, just keep an eye out, and I'll be screaming from the mountaintops if it gets picked up. So don't worry.
Yeah, is it worth it? Like, can you monetize much on it if it goes on YouTube or?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. It all depends, mostly, the reason I'd like to get more of even if it's small, an upfront check is because those filmers, came and gave me, when I called those guys, I told them like, hey, I don't have any budget. You guys can come camp with us and eat what we eat. And, like, I can't pay you for your time. And so like, ideally what we're trying to do is, recoup the original costs and then, be able to pay those guys. That's what, the big payoff for me now. I hope so, because it would feel great to write those guys who took, a chance on me a check. That'd be about the most I could ask for.
Yeah.
What was some of the wildest shit that happened? Because I'm bummed that I won't be able to go watch it on Friday, or I would.
Yeah, no, a lot of the wildest stuff, believe it or not, didn't make it on camera.
Because you guys weren't filming or something.
Well, yeah, just like middle of the night, that sort of thing. Yeah. So we have a few good stories, but like one of my favorites is one night I had went to bed a little later than the other two filmers. They went to bed before me and they left the tent unzipped, and I was brushing my teeth, and then I came back and there's a skunk right in front of the tent trying to about to crawl into this unzipped tent flap. And I start yelling and I'm throwing rocks at it, and then it'd pick its tail up at me. And I'm like, no, thanks, sir. So stop. And I'd be trying to throw these little rocks right in front of it to try and scare it away. I'm yelling everything. It took me like 45 minutes to get rid of this thing. And these two are just dead asleep.
Sleeping.
Moments from disaster the whole time, no problems. And yeah, I'm just like, yeah. So like that sort of stuff. We had a barge almost flip us over in the middle of the night that didn't get it on film.
Like on the Columbia?
Yeah, exactly. Just because we're coming up in the middle and it's the middle of the night, we're trying to paddle at night because there's less wind. Mm-hmm. If you know much about the Columbia River Gorge, it's an incredibly windy place. That's like where windsurfing was born.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to paddle at night to fight some of that wind. And then just have, we can barely see anything, and there's big wakes coming off the barges, that sort of deal. So a lot of interesting things that maybe, didn't make it on the film. Some interesting interactions with people. One of my favorite was Braxton was hanging out talking on the phone, and I was like laying flat on my back in this parking lot of dam we had paddled up to and we were sleeping in. All of a sudden, this guy in this, pickup truck. I didn't see his face, but Braxton always describes him as like quintessential hillbilly, missing a few teeth, truck's all beat up, rolls up, and he sticks his head out the window. And I heard him say this, and he looks at Braxton and goes, "You seen any raccoons around here?" And Braxton goes, "No." And the guy goes, "Watch this," and holds out a bag of cereal or dog food or something like that and starts shaking it. And Braxton says behind him in the bushes he can hear all the raccoons, and he was like, "Nope, I'm done with this." Walks right away. The guy comes out there every night, I think, and feeds the raccoons. So then I just stood up from the parking lot and I'm like, oh my God, I got to make sure our food's in good shape because these raccoons are going to be all over this place. Never saw any, but I'm sure there were thousands.
That guy was the raccoon whisperer.
Yeah, exactly. So.
And a big part of this film was to talk about just environmental stuff that's going on with rivers.
Yeah, rivers in general and some specifics, and try and, pull things. Again, we talk about Butte a lot of, so when you'd crush up, we talked about how there were 13 smelters, right? Mm-hmm. So you crush up all those smelters, you melt a bunch of stuff down, a bunch of toxins go into the air, but then what's left is you have some like a lot of heavy metals and things like that. You've taken the valuable metals out, but you have things like arsenic and, and just crushed up rock and all kinds of different stuff. And so that's all called mine tailings. And what they did is they just flushed the mine tailings down Silverboat Creek. And so at the height of Butte, they were putting about 1,000 tons of mine tailings into Silverboat Creek every single day.
No wonder the fish died.
Well, yeah, it became completely devoid of life. Like
Mhm.
there was, not a tadpole in there,
Yeah.
not a macroinvertebrate, nothing.
All the
Like,
the walls of the river were probably like bright red.
yeah, they talk about the Clark Fork flowing red.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, it was, completely channelized, an industrial river. And so they've done a lot of work to, make that better in some ways. And on one side, it looks way better. If you see any of our footage or see the film, there's a lot of, nicer, better look at it. It's way prettier than it used to be. It looks like a river again. They've put in billions of dollars and years of work to get it that way. But on the flip side, it was called, so Silverbow Creek was called Sintopke by the Salish speaking people.
Mm.
What that meant was the place where you shoot them in the head. And so the bull trout were so large and so numerous, and the creek was so small that the best way to fish for them was to shoot them in the head with your bow and arrow. So you didn't waste any meat, and there were that many large fish.
Wow.
So Silverbow Creek is way better than it used to be, and fish have returned, but there's still to this day not a single bull trout in Silverbow Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no water. When the fish biologists do their surveys, there's no water in the whole basin that is suitable for bull trout. Mm-hmm. So, we talked about some things like that. And this idea of, things come at a cost. I'm not saying that I love the fact that when I wake up in the morning and flip the lights on, that it's, warm and that the lights turn on. And I love driving my car. Again, I grew up in Montana here where it was cold. Elk Park's really cold. And I'm happy I didn't have to ride my bike to school every day, you know, but those advancements come with, a cost. And in some ways we're still paying some of those costs today. And so with that, that's kind of the idea we took. We're, in no ways, a lot of people, in these days with environmentalism try and point fingers, and we're not doing that. We just wanted to tell the story of what the river looks like. And with that, think about the type of things that, we can do better in the future. And
people didn't know any better. It's not like they had these intentions.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, and what do you do with all this mine tailings? Well, it's easy. We put it in the river and we, it's not our problem anymore. And, but we can also learn some from that thinking. We can think that pushing things downstream, while in those days was probably not something that they were doing intentionally to harm the environment or the people downstream. It's something we can learn from and think, oh, let's not push that issue. Let's us deal with it, sort of idea. So
someone was just showing me recently, it was out near Alder, Virginia City area. If you pull up Google Maps, you can see all the tailings, just the piles.
Yeah, that's the
it's insane. Yeah.
So there they were going for gold, right? And so they'd flood the creek and then they'd bring the dredge through, and you can still see all the mounds.
Yeah, they're everywhere out there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said that, and he's pull it up on maps and look, and you just see them these perfect, just look like the zigzags everywhere.
You'll notice them when you drive out there too. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Next time you go through Virginia City, you'll see them everywhere. It's just all these little, mound after mound that is all made by those dredges.
Yeah. Yes, wild. The history out here is wild. The Butte history and the Virginia City history.
Yeah, Virginia City's got as much history as Butte does, with the first ever organized crime is in Virginia City. You guys have heard that, right?
No.
So Henry Plummer is the sheriff in Virginia City at the time, and there's a bunch of highwaymen. So the before Virginia City, it was in Bannock, which is more by Dillon, and so they'd have to take all the, basically on a stagecoach type of idea, they'd take the gold that was now coming out of Virginia City and they'd take it to Bannock. And, all of a sudden, all these highwaymen would come out, rob the stagecoach, and then go running off. And then the sheriff would find out and chase after him. Mm-hmm. And so what it turned out was that the sheriff was in on it. He was the head of the gang. He was telling them when things would leave, so they could steal these miners' gold, sort of thing. And then also the flip side of that is, right, then he's chasing after him, but not really catching him.
Yeah.
And so what happens is the miners, basically figure it out and, vigilante justice, and end up hanging not only Henry Plummer, but basically the rest of his gang in Virginia City and that sort of thing. But it's the first known organized crime. Okay. Is that, that the sheriff's in on it. Sure, and it's a whole gang sort of idea and that sort of deal. So another film idea for you.
Yeah, there we go.
Pretty amazing.
You're going to do another film.
I got about 10 up.
I'll watch it. You'll have a Netflix deal pretty soon, dude. Don't worry.
What you remember Dempsey's guy with the gold?
I
guy
don't. I don't.
So
I don't remember the guy's name.
This
But
friend of ours, he didn't grow up. No, he grew up in Bozeman, but he lives out.
oh, you look half and half.
Yeah, like Bozeman, Alder. But there's some famous guy out there who robbed a lot of these stagecoaches and had all this gold, and they never found this gold.
So they don't know where that's Henry Plummer. They don't know where the gold is.
So he's convinced that he knows where it is.
Oh, has he went and got it yet?
Yeah.
He says it's in a really deep like spot in the creek that you have to get scuba.
No, he
gear.
said it's a spring that they haven't found the bottom. It's somewhere
They
on the
haven't
Ruby.
found the bottom of it.
Somewhere
Okay.
on the Ruby spring.
Yeah, I mean that's the right area.
Yeah.
And so he's like, dude, we got to get scuba gear and go.
He's gonna be mad at you.
That's in your next adventure, bro.
I guess so.
Get a film crew going. Or get some underwater gear, bro.
Yeah, your buddy's gonna be mad that you just told everybody
He
where it
told
is.
it to everybody on the podcast.
Oh, was he? Okay.
And there's
I've only
millions
listened to Dietz's,
and millions of people listen to this podcast, so like everybody knows.
Yeah. There's a good show that they did on Netflix about the famous shooting at the Corral.
Oh, the OK Corral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know why I keep. It's like Wyatt
Earp.
Earp.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a 5-part series.
I haven't seen it. I just know a little bit about that. That they shot like
They shot it in
230.
Virginia City?
No, this was in Carson City, right?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know where it is. I think it's Nevada. The OK Corral.
Okay, yeah, no.
Have you ever watched Deadwood, the famous show? Yeah. But I just know that on that, right, at the shootout at the OK Corral, I think they shot like 200 and some odd bullets, and like 3 guys.
I think that was in Tombstone, Arizona.
Yeah, Tombstone. There you go.
So it's like I think it's a 5 or 6 part series. I thought they did a really good job with it because it's like a docudrama. So they cover a lot of the history and they've made a little drama out of it. But yeah, it's called Wyatt Earp and the Cowboy War.
Yeah.
But really, and you see like J.P. Morgan's involved with this, and you see just the history of it, and you're like, man, this is crazy. Like, but these are still the big banks right now in America, and it was pretty cool just to hear that. But yeah, guys robbing stagecoaches, that was very big.
Well, yeah, that's like Wells Fargo, which is a bank now, was a stagecoach company. You know, that's why the stagecoach is on the top. You know.
Yeah, I don't even think I ever put that together until I watched the show.
What were we talking about earlier?
Oh, you guys, we were talking about mine tailings,
the gold,
and then where the gold is.
Yeah, my question was going to be, what are we doing nowadays as a society that might be like similar to that idea of like polluting the river, right? And just like, what are we fucking up now that we don't even realize it? Curious what would that be?
What I can tell you from my personal experience, you know, a lot of the cleanups are things from like that or older industrial cleanups. You know, like one of our big ones we pass by is, you know, an old paper mill that's right on the edge of the river and the chemicals are getting in. But that's all like stuff that happened in the past, you know, and a lot of other rivers, other places are still having that sort of development next to them. But what I can tell you, the thing that you probably don't think about is you would be shocked at the amount of plastic, water bottles and that sort of thing we saw in the river. It was, I mean, stunning. We saw a bunch of crazy garbage too. Like I saw a trampoline floating down the river. Like, I don't know how that's happening. You know, we'd see, you know, boats, cars, more barbed wire than you could imagine sort of thing. But the wildest stuff was just like the amount of plastic in the river. Pretty wild. So that'd be my one that I'd say you don't think
that we just don't even notice.
Yeah.
I'm such a loser, but I like
You're not a loser.
These are all I carry in my vehicles now.
I love
we
it.
have water for our clients, and like those ones too on the wall behind you. But
well, it's funny because you actually do it for a health reason.
Well, both. It's 2 birds because it's terrible for you to drink out of plastic.
I agree.
And the plastic's terrible for the environment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that doesn't surprise me because what's the size of that? Like the pile of plastic in the ocean.
It's supposed to be like the size of Texas. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my only experience, and you're reminding me of this. I went on a short sailing trip in the Caribbean, and I landed on some islands off the coast of Panama, and when I got there, I was like, man, I'm literally in paradise. Like you think of like Caribbean waters, tiny little islands with like 5 palm trees on them. That's like where I was, right? Like perfect commercial. And then you look like what's on the beach, and it's a lot of plastic. And it's just floating out there in the ocean, and it'll wash ashore. And so I remember that was shocking a little bit of like, holy shit, like I'm in paradise, but like paradise is dirty,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, it's our mess.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like, you know, like you said, maybe it's not that surprising, but at the same time, it kind of is.
I guess it's being ignored.
Well, exactly. Because when you
ignored.
see the picture of the place, it doesn't show you the 20 plastic water bottles that are out there or the, you know, whatever it is. And so like, I think that it is not surprising because you're like, oh yeah, of course there's a lot of plastic out there. But it's like you said, until you see it yourself, you're like, well, it's more than I thought. And it's, you know, again, paradise dirtied is a great way to, you know, put it, this idea that it's marred in some way, you know, and it's just being marred by what we're doing ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It probably is. Like trash pollution is probably our biggest thing that we're ignoring right now.
Yeah.
Just like general, like everyday trash pollution.
Yeah. I mean, that's from my experience on this trip, what I'd say. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, the tough thing is that there's a lot of issues out there and, you know, some are bad and some aren't as bad as we think and that sort of thing. But, you know, like that's the one that I can tell you I saw personally.
It's an interesting idea that I guess just popped into my mind. So I've been listening to this guy, Jim Rohn, who's like a inspirational speaker, let's say. And he was talking about like, you know, what the cost is for society for people to like, you know, we pay through our taxes, you know, like the government to like go on the highways and pick up the trash, you know, periodically throughout the year. Right. And, you know, that kind of made me think of like, what if we didn't? And what I mean by that is like, what if, okay, we all want to save money on taxes. Okay. Then let's do it. And let's all volunteer. Or maybe it's a law that like you as a citizen are mandated once a year for one day to go out for 8 hours and pick up trash.
Right.
You know, then people I think would notice this kind of stuff and then be like, well, I would rather not pay out of my taxes, but I'll go work for the day. And you know what I mean? So it's like an idea of like, let's just fix the problem. Right.
Right.
Like, and then we would start to notice the problem because we're a part of this, of fixing it. And then over time, I would imagine it would improve.
Definitely. Your idea made me think I like this thought, made me imagine that, you know, when you have your property taxes, you also have a checklist of like what you want to go do for the day instead. Like you're like, well, I'm not paying my road money, so I'm going to fill potholes. And then, you know, like you just have your personal list. I mean, it's kind of like your like checklist of going down. And then it comes to like empty porta potties. And you're like, no, I'll pay the money for that one. Like, you know,
well, I kind of like that idea, right? It's like, you know, like how do you save money? Well, like you could do some of the shit yourself. Right. Yeah. And so it is interesting. Like we do, which there almost kind of should be an option to be like, I'm going to participate and then get a reduction on my taxes.
Yeah. Your checklist. You're like,
I don't know. I kind of like that idea.
I'm filling potholes this year, but
yeah. Whatever it might be. It might be. Yeah.
For sure.
Like, yeah, I like that idea.
Dude, I got another important question to ask you.
Yes, sir.
How many man-made igloos have you slept in?
How many man-made igloos? I've slept in a few snow caves. We do have, is that a Thai question?
Yeah. What is that? So what is that in reference?
It's referencing to a time me and the other kid who lived with me in Thai, whose name is Joel Hebert, you know, kid who grew up with me, did a bunch of the climbing and skiing that we've done together. But anyway, one time we were out in the mountains, outside of Immigrant heading into the Beartooths. And first we had tried to ski down by Yellowstone, but we didn't know that the like annual bison harvest was going on at that time. So there's like, you know, all the bison are going to come out and all the guys with guns are sitting on the other side. And we'd have to like walk right through the middle of that. So we arrived at that like right at before daybreak. And then we were like, okay, so we got to figure out something different. And we drive way back up towards like kind of near Chico area, you know, in between Livingston and the park. And we're like, you know, my buddy Joel's like, well, there's this, you know, this mountain I know of over here. We'll go do that one instead. And so it was twice as long to get there as we thought it was. It was like one of those things where we had the like one-way distance, and that was So anyway, we ended up, you know, doing some like and there were some avalanche issues and some condition issues. And so we were, like doing some pretty like gnarly climbing without our proper climbing gear and that sort of thing to get to this spot. And then we got there and then
with your skis.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We get to where we were there. And then it was like one of these deals where it's like, well, it's pretty late now, so we either have to turn around right now or we'll spend the night. And so we didn't have any of our overnight stuff and that sort of thing. So we tried to dig a snow cave, but where we were, the snowpack was pretty shallow. So we ended up in like kind of a snow pit and decided
to block the wind.
Yeah, exactly. Decided to spend the night. There was a few trees around, so we, like line it with pine boughs sort of thing. And, just spent the night, but it was a much rougher night for Joel than me. I had some like fresh socks with me and that sort of thing. And Joel had his wet socks. And
was Ty with you guys or no?
No, Ty wasn't there. Ty was at home and we were supposed to be back that night. So I remember we came rolling in the next day eventually. And Ty's like, where have you guys been? But Joel had a rough night. I remember we had some space blankets and that sort of thing that were, and I just remember I was actually sleeping pretty well and then woke up because Joel was like hypothermic. He was shivering so bad and like, had to get a fire started in the middle of the night sort of thing, get him warmed back up. But then we, woke up and finished. We climbed the mountain, skied the next day and then came home. We looked like we had been through, a tough time. So it was a pretty rough trip. But again, yeah, Ty couldn't believe that we had been, spent the night kind of like a igloo type of deal. It was mostly just a snow pit, to be honest, because there wasn't enough for a snow cave, which would have been a lot warmer. But Joel had a rough night. If you ask him to this day, probably one of the rougher nights of Joel's life. So he didn't sleep near as much as I did. That
sounds pretty gnarly.
He was like, when I say hypothermic, I mean like he was uncontrollably, like he was at the point where I was sleeping next to him and he woke up. He was shivering so uncontrollably that he woke me up and like, couldn't move, didn't have much motor function type of thing.
Yeah,
so,
he was fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. But my favorite part about that story,
and you're like, dude, I'm taking a nap. Leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly. So, but one of my favorite parts about that story, looking back now, at the time it seemed so obvious, but like then got him back warmed up. He got like an hour or two of sleep. We're real dehydrated. We've been melting a little snow, sort of thing. Like. It's not super efficient to melt snow to drink sort of deal. And anyway, just, now it looks so funny, but we woke up and it was obvious that we were still going to do that. Like, there was no like, well, Joel just had the worst night of his life. Maybe we should just go down. It was we're still going to go, finish climbing the mountain, ski, and then we'll come home. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yes, by that time you probably felt a little better.
Well, not much.
Yeah.
Yeah. You only get more, dehydrated.
Yeah, that's true.
We didn't have any food either. We have 1 day's worth of food, 1 day's worth of water, no. I just happened to have the space blankets and some hand warmers and things like that. The fire starter that kept us through. But yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
You got any new projects in the making?
That's probably my most common question, especially at all these canoe project showings. But to be honest, just because I'd never made a movie before and like it feels like even though the canoe trip, like I said, ended not the summer that just went, the one before that. Even though the expedition's done, the adventure's kind of still going. We're doing, I didn't know how to get it in theaters, and now I'm still learning how to trying to get it sold and that sort of thing. So, like I said, we used to do a lot, maybe more advertising, but lately I've been focusing a lot on the canoe stuff and trying to work some other projects and other trips in here and there, but no current plans.
Ty alluded to something tropical, maybe. I don't know what he was talking about.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Maybe just unless he was talking about so again, when I ran
maybe the running
deal
one.
in Hawaii,
Yeah.
that must have been what it was.
That probably was.
Because
I was wondering when you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. So
how long did it take you to run that 50 miles?
It took 18 hours.
Okay.
So, and that was fast for me. Again, I'm not a runner.
Yeah, that is fast.
Well, I expected like 36. So I was pretty happy with my under 24 hours. So I thought I'd be in like the 28 to 36 range. So I was pretty stoked with 18. Finished way sooner than I thought. I finished at like 2 a.m. But way sooner than I thought I would.
Where'd you start?
Just so if you know the big island of Hawaii at all. So north of Kona away. So we went the long way. There's a shorter way coming from the Hilo side, but I like.
And you rode it to the top of the volcano.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I've to Mauna Kea.
Mhm.
And so like I said, I've been to Hawaii a few times, and it was something I'd always wanted to do because it's kind of a mix. I've like loved Hawaii and
Mhm.
always had been to the Kona side and stayed there. And then, the mountainside is like that volcano's a lot taller than people think. It's taller than the tallest mountain in Montana, taller than the tallest mountain, taller than the Grand Teton. Like, people think of mountains in the West, and, that mountain, Mauna Kea, is a lot taller than most of them.
What is it?
It's 13.8 and some change. So it's pretty tall. Montana's highest peak's about 1,000 feet shorter.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, people don't realize there's a ski resort there.
Oh, there isn't. But
well, no, there's a ski resort in Hawaii on the Big Island.
No.
Yeah, there is.
No, you just rent skis and go to the top. It's not like a resort.
Okay,
so it's where I was.
Sorry, I thought there was a resort.
No,
okay.
There's like Pineapple Powder's the dream.
Okay.
And so what it is there's like a place on the Big Island that rents skis. And then you get a Jeep and you drive your ass to the top and then ski down, and then your buddies pick you back up, and you do that.
My bad.
Yeah. No. Yeah, but Pineapple Powder's a thing. So that's exactly what you're talking about. But there's not like a chairlift.
Okay. I thought there was like a few lifts.
No. Okay. It's just this like idea of chasing it and like hoping to get your pineapple powder.
I gotcha.
But so anyway, yeah, I went and did that this January, and then met Ty and Sammy on their honeymoon in Maui. We flew over from the Big Island, finished that. We're there for like 2 days, and then met them and stayed with Sammy's grandmother in Maui.
They were over there for a long time, weren't they?
Yeah, they were there. Their whole honeymoon was forever.
So I know. I just saw them like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, I gave him a hug. I was like, dude, I haven't seen you. And like, how was it?
Yeah, exactly. When they did a bunch of time there, they went to the Philippines. They did a bunch of time in the Philippines. Like, it was pretty amazing. Pretty cool honeymoon for sure. I want to say it was like 40 days.
Yeah, that sounds right. Because I hadn't seen him.
It was a long time.
I hadn't been in the gym as much as I wish I would, but I had not seen him there once. So
that's the way you should do a honeymoon.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Pretty awesome.
Go really do it. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was cool to get to, like I said, hop over from the Big Island, and then get to go hang out over and talk with Ty and see some friends and relax after the big run. So
that's awesome.
Hell yeah.
What else we got?
Got anything?
I don't know. We can wrap up there. We can keep going.
No, I'm gonna ask one of these.
Yeah, I love questions. Let's
crazy,
hear it.
Intimate ones.
Okay.
All right, let's start with one of these. What's something you've always wanted to do but haven't, and why do you think you haven't?
Kyle, you mind grabbing that cup of coffee for me? This is going to be the start of his next project.
Well, so that's the, like, I guess I would almost say the flip side, right? Like, I maybe get to live a really amazing life where I get to do those things. I'm pretty lucky that at one point that would have been to canoe to the ocean, and I probably would have answered that, and I would have never done it because my, rivers are not my, necessarily my biggest passion. Like we say that the other kid who was with me had canoed, had never been in a boat, anything like that was river based. I had only canoed like 4 times beforehand. So it's like, it's just not my thing. But then, I really try and make those types of things happen. I had wanted to run from sea to summit in Hawaii for several years now. It's something that I like really loved this idea of, but I was never a runner. But then, life gave me the opportunity to run more. So it gave me a chance to do it. And so I don't know that I necessarily have many of those things that I could tell you. There's some things that live in the back of your mind, but, the inspiration just isn't right, but I'm maybe sure I'll get to, sort of thing. But yeah, I try to live my life in a way that I get to go do those things, Yeah. Yeah. It's a little different. Yeah. I know I have a very lucky and separate life.
How do you think you do that? How do you think you structure it that way?
I mean, part of it is just, doing whatever it takes to make it happen. Like I said, I didn't know how to make a movie, but you piece it all together and you try your best, sort of thing. And I think that that's true with any of it, again, I might not have the most traditional job, which allows me to do other things, but, maybe somebody who has a more traditional job has more disposable income, so they could, I think it's really just about your choice. If you want something and want to make it happen, I think you should, and you can. Like, you can make anything you want happen. You might not be able to have everything you want in life, but you can have anything you want in life.
Yeah, I also think it's I like the idea of you can have it all. You just might not be able to have it all at the exact same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you want these 10 things, you can maybe only do 3 or 4 of them at the same time. And then there's a different 3 or 4 and a different 3 or 4, but like you can get to all 10 as an example.
Yeah.
Who helped you forge that mentality?
I don't know, man. Some of it was definitely, martial arts and growing up that way for sure. I don't know. I just think that it's what I've seen in life. I think that a lot of people, it's really easy. Me too. It's easy to make excuses for ourselves. It's like the easiest thing that there is to do. But, the people who don't, no matter who they are, get after it the way they can, is like, are the people who I admire and the people who get the 10 things they want off their list checked off, like, whether it's, whatever you want. Like, I just really, truly believe that, like, hard work pays off in the end. And, you might have to make sacrifices that you don't expect, and it might not make your life all that happy, like a great example talking about MMA, how many, UFC champions end up getting divorced from their wives. Like, it's a tough deal or struggle with that sort of thing. Like, to be a UFC champion, a lot of other pieces of your life are going to have to, fade away or take a back seat to that. And, I think that that's true with everything, though, that the hard work pays off if you're willing to make those sacrifices for a while,
Yeah, and they're big sacrifices.
Yeah, I mean, it's the word, that's a great point. The word sacrifices may not even, be a large enough word, an impactful enough word.
Yeah, I just think most people, like, we all obviously get in our own way, but so many people don't even like have that mentality to, like, you can do it. They just like, I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you can. It might take a lot, and what you have to give up might not be something you want to give up, and you might find that out. But I think if you work hard enough and try, that it'll all end up, getting what you want for sure. If you want it bad enough, same idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you took the river all the way to the ocean, like you're a living example of that.
Yeah, and again, like, even more so than me, the kid who got in the canoe with me, my cousin Braxton Mitchell, had never been in a canoe before.
You're probably a huge inspiration for him.
Well, but I mean, he is for me. The most rewarding part of the trip for me is even, like, looking back now, is like watching this kid grow up and become, so much more than he was when he first started, and so that's, like, for me, I would again say, that he was a lot of ways an inspiration for me too, like but if this kid, there's been plenty of people who've done harder paddling trips than ours, way harder, but there's never been anybody who's done a paddling trip with, this hard with less experience than Braxton, Yeah. The kid didn't even, know what he's signing up for, and he can make it to the ocean. Like, you can do a lot of things,
What's the term when you're a boy and you go into manhood?
Yeah, I
want to say initiation, but it's not that.
I don't know. I think I know the word you're looking for, but I always just say I get to watch him, grow up.
Yeah, like what a fucking way to do it
in 52 days. And this is not in any way meant to be disparaging, because a lot of people have different wild journeys. But his father was in the Navy, and it was really funny because like, he doesn't see his son for 52 days, and then I bring him back, and he told me, he was like, man, you did in 52 days for my son what the Navy did for me in like 3 years. It's like, I got to watch this kid grow up fast. Like, there was a lot of, like, we're going someplace, and today you got to carry this canoe 18 miles, like, you've never done anything like that. So that sort of deal.
Yeah, they say we don't have that anymore. Like, men don't get that. It's going to piss me off till I figure it out. But they don't have that, like, initiation into manhood.
Yeah, that maturation process.
Yeah, but that, like, what a thing to go through at 18. Yeah. That's badass.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting how, like, you can gain a lot of momentum doing stuff like that, like personal momentum, in that, like, you do something like an adventure like that that's really hard. And then you're like, I can fucking do anything.
Yeah.
And then you go to the next thing, and that momentum can last for a while, but you also have to like keep doing it and keep up the adventure or, the challenge to keep pushing yourself. But it's a good feeling to like do something like that and then, and be proud of it,
Yeah, and I always say that he didn't know what he was capable of before he left, and like now
Right.
he knows. Like, at least
Well,
somewhat.
and that's
so,
not
like,
even what he's capable of. He's probably
it's
like he
even
could
more
push
so.
way farther than that.
Exactly, right? But like now he
know?
goes home to normal life, and he knows that he can do at
Mhm.
least what he's already done.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's like the combination of those physical, mental, and emotional, spiritual feats, right? Like you can't remove one element of it, right? Because it's all intertwined. It's not like you can just remove the emotional part because you're like, I'm fucking emotional right now.
Yeah.
You might be sad, mad, pissed off, like whatever it might be. At the same time, you're like, I'm extremely physically tired. So it's like a combination of all those things where there's like a sweet spot.
Yeah. I mean, and not only are they like, you can't take one apart, but they affect each other so much.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sayings, the guy who like taught me, judo since I was a little kid and a, huge mentor in my life, his name's John Atman. But one of his favorite sayings is that like he did MMA too and taught me. And, whenever he trains people, he's huge on conditioning. Like, you might fight somebody who's one of John's students who, doesn't have as much technique as somebody else or that sort of thing. But like one of his people is never going to be out conditioned. And it's because he loves this saying that like fatigue makes cowards of brave men. And like, that's something that I remember telling Braxton to a lot, that it's, he's like tired physically. So now all of a sudden he's like, feels like he can't do it. And it's like, no, like your mental strength is still there, like the one affects the other. Yes. But like, if you're not feeling like you can do it mentally, then you physically can't feel like you can do it either, So it's like, it's not just that these things you can't take one away, but they affect each other, really heavily in things that are, strenuous.
Yeah. 100%.
How much did you condition for that 50 mile?
A lot. I ran a lot. To be honest, I'd only ever ran a half marathon before that. And that was on like zero training. So
what's the furthest you ran in training for that?
For that, I ran 2 marathons total. So I ran over 24 miles twice, but, yeah, it was just
you were talking about conditioning. I'm like, maybe your mind was so conditioned you just did it.
No, it was definitely a lot of like, and like I said, for me, the reason that it was the right time to do it was because it was, I'm going on tour with these films. So I'm not getting to ski and climb the way I want and like achieve those style of goals. And, for me, motivation, I love to train for something. I love to like work out and do that, but I won't do it that serious if I don't have some sort of goal. So, to set a goal where, because otherwise I'm going to these shows and I'm like maybe going to the hotel gym once in a while and like not trying all that hard.
Yeah, you're just kind of going through the
motions. Working out, but not much, whereas, now I can set something where it's like, okay, I can go here and I can run, like I can be in Portland and I can run. I can be wherever, and whether it's in the hotel on the treadmill or
crank out 10 miles.
Yeah, exactly. You can go run. And so that's why it was
it's actually a really cool way to look at a new city also.
Yeah, totally.
Just like go on a couple, like go, all right, cool, I'm going this way today and tomorrow I'm going that way. And you get to see like a whole city in a few days.
Totally. Yeah. And, like I said, not all that running was outside or other places, but it just really fit my schedule. So it was easy to train for. And, the other thing about running is that I really like, and again, I'm not much of a runner by any means, but it there is some technique to it, but there's much less technique and skill than compared to rock climbing or doing jujitsu or something like that. Like everybody can go run. And so I love that anybody can go do it. But I also love that, like, for me, between training and conditioning and like mental strength, that's like what it takes to run far and hard, like I don't to climb really, really hard. Like I have to, have some like, finger strength and things like that. And that's not untrue with climbing, you know, I mean, with running, I have to have some of those
Yeah.
traits, you know, I have to be able to not get shin splints and that sort of thing. But like,
Or you could just run with them.
yeah, oh yeah, exactly. Like Goggins style. Right. But I just mean that, you know, like there are other things that I do that are so much more technique based. And so to not do those things and to instead just, I love this idea that like, I'm not a great runner. I'm still not a great runner, but if I have enough like mental fortitude and enough conditioning and training, like I can run 58 miles, even though I've never ran near that far before, you know?
Yeah. I have a buddy who did 100-miler. And afterwards, I remember like having this conversation with him of like, most people would be like stranded on the side of the road somewhere and they'd be 40 or 50 miles from fucking civilization and nobody's going to come help them. And I'm like, and now you feel like you can just like, that's fine. I'll run it out.
Yeah,
You know, like,
make it home.
like no big deal. And I'm like, that's crazy, dude. Like, you know, because at the point when he got to run a 100-miler, like he was literally running like 30 miles all the time. And he's like, it's 30 miles, no problem.
Yeah, exactly. And like, again, that's, I think the magic of running, right? Is that when he has his mind right, when he's conditioning right, like it's amazing. You know, I don't have to put in, you know, 20 years of getting my, you know, tendon strength right, or learning jujitsu techniques and the right grips and that sort of thing. I can like go, and if I'm conditioning enough and my brain's right enough, like I can pound it out, you know, 30 miles becomes no big deal. Whereas to the average person, if you were like, go run 30 miles right now, it's like, that's a massive feat.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Who wins in a jiu-jitsu role, you or Ty?
Oh, jiu-jitsu, I got him. Still to this day. Without a doubt.
I want to see it. What belt are you?
I have a purple belt in jiu-jitsu.
Oh, nice. Hell yeah.
I haven't trained. To be fair, he probably beats me up because I haven't consistently trained jiu-jitsu in years.
Yeah.
But
he's got you on striking.
oh yeah, he did.
He's a savage,
phenomenal striker. I mean, yeah, he really sees striking really, really well. He's a great striker for sure. Yeah, yeah, definitely. He passed me striking pretty early on. I had been, I've been training a lot longer. Well, not consistently, but when Ty came into the gym, I had already had, you know, maybe even though some of it was as a kid, I had like a lot more experience than him. But he passed me in the striking realm very early on. Like he's
got quick hands.
Well, and he just feels it. Like he understands the angles really well and like how striking works.
Yeah.
Range, that sort of thing.
He's like the right amount of demented too.
Yeah, exactly.
Likes it a little too much.
Yeah, totally.
Do you think there's anything in your life that's like made you that's made you who you are today? Like anything specific you could think of? Like, fuck, I wouldn't be that person if it wasn't for this, that, or...
Definitely, like I said, martial arts, judo when I was a little kid. John Atman, same guy, taught me, you know, he had 3 rules for judo class, and I've kind of like adopted those rules to my life. Like, it's what I focus my life on. And like his 3 rules were that you should be respectful, that you should try hard, and then rule 3 was like have fun, and if you weren't having fun, have a positive attitude. And like, I mean, I can tell you that doing hard things, like a positive attitude, will keep you through anything. And so like those are like, that's definitely something that has shaped my life. Those are 3 rules I try and live my life by to this day. You know, I think that that's kind of the only 3 rules you need in life.
Those are good ones right there.
I swear, if I had to, I'm not from Montana, but if I had to summarize Montana in one word, it would be respect. Yeah,
it's, you know, it's important in a lot of ways, you know, whether it's people you just meet or, you know, respect for the landscape or a lot of different things. But it's definitely a word that is ingrained into us. I don't know if it's the culture of the people or just the place, but it's something that's important for sure.
It's in my, like, when I mainly think of it, but I do think like the people that are here, the people that have been here for, you know, hundreds of years before, and just the nature, you know, grizzly bears, the power of the rivers, the mountains, the avalanches. Like, if you don't have that level of respect, it's not going to respect you back, and it's going to humble you way faster than you want.
For sure. I mean, yeah. And I think, you know, in some ways, maybe Montana shows it more, but I think that that's the truth of life, right? Like, you know, I think a lot of people, this is a great example for you as someone who's trained some, but like a lot of people think people who are going to be MMA fighters are going to be douchebags, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just and that's partially because people who claim to be MMA fighters in the bars are douchebags and they don't actually do it, right?
Yeah, Hollywood a little bit.
Yeah,
Too,
right. Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is, and there used to be people who were douchebags who did MMA, but for the most part now, like if you're, a Thule person or a person who doesn't show much respect, whatever it is, and you come in to jiu-jitsu
what's a
class,
Thule?
A tool.
like a tool.
Oh,
a tool.
okay.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I almost
You're
didn't pick. I almost didn't pick
yeah.
up what you said.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I got it.
Sorry. A tool of a person, I maybe should have said.
Sure, I got you.
But, one of those people, you're going to come in to do, jiu-jitsu and you're going to try and be too rough. And then some dude who's 58 and a purple belt is going to fuck you up, even though you're 21 and strong. Mm-hmm. And so that, in that moment, it becomes a thing. You have a choice to, be respectful, to learn, and to become a better person, or you quit. Like that's what happens to those people who come and do MMA for the, early times. And, I think that that's like really what respect is, but it's a microcosm for life. It's the same thing. You can either show up, go into the mountains here where life is a little more raw and, be respectful and be cautious and, learn and that sort of thing. Cause you are going to be humbled your first time, but maybe you come away unscathed and you learn and come back and be respectful, or you're going to go into it and you're, going to be, unrespectful. You're going to be humbled the first time and then you're never going to come back. And I think that that's just like, a cosm for life in respect itself.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it broadly. Because you do. You just see it firsthand.
Yeah.
Because Montana is such a visual place. But yeah, that's a good principle for life.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the same thing if you, think you're, hotshot soccer player and go show up for the first time and you really don't know when those guys who are European, you play with the first European kids who've been playing soccer since they can walk, same thing. I think it really does apply to everything, whether it's, like I said, jiu-jitsu, life, the mountains.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, I think you can, in like modern society, you can kind of hide from the rawness. But I think in places like Montana, if you are going to go participate like out in the wilderness, it forces you to respect it.
Yeah, and I think, the flip side of that is that people do die doing these things. And, but it's not like, I don't want anybody to ever think that they shouldn't go out for their first time, right? Like I'm a person who loves the mountains and that sort of thing. And like people do die doing those things. And like if you don't show respect, you are going to, have a hard time in the mountains for your first time or in the rawness of the environment. But on the flip side of that, like if you are respectful, don't be paralyzed to not go. Go and get out there the first time for sure.
There's plenty that you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
That like you'll never,
and
that it really isn't dangerous. Right? Yeah. So there's plenty that you can do that really isn't dangerous and you can
build up to the right things.
Yeah.
Cause I just never, I just never want people to ever think that like they shouldn't go, because people are afraid of the outdoors in a lot of ways. And,
and they shouldn't be.
Yeah. It's, it's some of the most beautiful, magical things you'll experience too,
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. I would agree with that.
I guess the flip side too is you can just go to like a bad part of a bad city and not have respect and like you can get shot up or stabbed pretty quick. So it's like,
well, it's everybody's scared of different things.
There's different respects for different.
Yeah. Like I grew up in the mountains and like, I know a lot of people who are afraid to be in the dark, like without a headlamp or just out in the dark in the woods. A lot of people are like, well, that's where scary things
and you're
happen.
like, fucking, have you seen the stars?
Well, yeah. Well, but my flip side of things is I'm like, that's where I'm comfortable. And like, I didn't grow up in the city. So when I do go to the city and I'm in Chicago and it's nighttime and I'm, I'm like, well, this is where the bad stuff happens. And like, I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. Like I'm uncomfortable in that situation.
That's
I don't
hilarious.
know.
Yeah.
And like, it's the same, but like, I'm sometimes I'm with friends though. Are you talking about? You know? Sorry for the cuss.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah, what are you talking about? This is no big deal.
We're gonna get pizza at this great freaking pizza joint. It's around the corner.
We're in a great neighborhood, but I don't know that. Like
that's hilarious.
It's it's like whatever your environment is. My joke with that is too always that like, anybody who grew up in Hawaii is not afraid of sharks.
Yeah.
But if you tell them about a bear, they're like,
Yeah.
holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, that's the scariest thing ever. For me, I'm like not afraid of bears at all. Like,
Yeah.
I respect bears. Like, you got to be cautious,
Yeah.
sure. But like, you start to think, I think about sharks sometimes. Like, I like to surf and that sort of thing, but I think about sharks. I'm like, that's scary. What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
so it's wherever you grew up also gives you, whatever, I shouldn't say where you grew up, whatever environment you're comfortable is, where to be respectful. And it's like, you can both experience these new things. You can go experience the ocean and be humbled, or you can go be, the right amount of respectful and learn and enjoy the ocean in other ways as well, So it applies to a lot of things.
I grew up on a dairy farm.
Yeah.
And
he's scared of cows.
Been around cows my whole life. It's like, like being around a dog. My sister, she was in high school. She was hanging out with these guys like straight out of the ghetto. They had pit bulls. Like, I swear they were always packing guns, like probably down the front of their blue jeans, and like, just complete thug gangster. Like,
So scared of these cows.
Then I'm like, man, like these guys are sketching me out. Like, I'm like, what's up with these guys? Like, they like definitely have guns on them. Like, and I'm younger than her, so and we're out there one day doing something with the cows, and these guys like. The cows come towards them. These guys like jump the fence and run. Like, I'm like, these guys are the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
because these guys like they were pretty tough.
They look,
right. But it's very funny to see them just freak out when they see a cow.
Yeah, it's so true.
It was just funny, vivid memory.
Totally right. Like it's the same exact thing, right?
I mean, I am aware of it now, and I pay attention to it, but like sometimes, I get nervous around horses, and so, and it depends on like, what kind of horse are we talking about, right? Like sometimes they're skittish and whatnot. And so, I just pay attention. Like I'm like, this motherfucker could kick me, So I pay attention around horses. I'm probably more scared than I should be at sometimes. And that's not good, cause they can pick up on your senses. But yeah, for me, it's like, I haven't been around them enough to really be comfortable.
I've been around it my whole life, and I will say, like, when you're behind a horse, that's a loaded gun.
Yeah,
so and that's how I treat it.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I mean.
Lots of people have been kicked by horses.
And that's what I mean. It's like I am paying attention when I walk behind a horse.
Yeah, when I'm like three quarters of the side of the horse is fine, with that back quarters.
Yeah,
you want to watch yourself.
Yeah, and that's the respect you've learned. Like you've learned that people have been kicked and die like that.
Yeah.
Like again, respect is maybe a different word than people think about. But like when I think about respect, you're respecting the situation. When you're back there, I'm keeping my eye out. I'm not getting too close. Like that's really part of what I mean in respecting the situation when we're talking about going outdoors or going into a new situation.
Yeah,
it doesn't just mean like I'm respecting the horse. Like I'm respecting what could happen in the situation.
Yeah.
Will you ever do another MMA fight?
I probably won't, to be honest. Like I said, part of me would always wants to. I don't know that I ever loved fighting. I started doing judo when I was 5. And so like fighting was kind of my next obvious step. Like I got there and it was obvious to fight and try, like I'd done tons of judo and jiu-jitsu tournaments. Like it was the next step. But I don't know that I actually ever loved fighting. I love training. When I think about it, I don't miss the act of actually fighting. Like I miss training. I miss the people. I miss training for a fight, but I don't know that I ever loved fighting itself, So the reality is I probably won't. Sometimes I think about it and I think it'd be great, but again, for me, it was, I came to this point in which, I felt that I could truly only be, great at one of the two. It was either, because when I was skiing, sometimes I'd be, I remember one time I had messed up a backflip and my back was all jacked for training and I had a fight coming up. And then I remember a different time that I was, fighting and I had fucked up my foot and I couldn't get it in my ski boot. And, it was a big ski trip was coming up. And it was just one of those things where they, with the way they interacted, I couldn't be great at both of them. Yeah. And I had to make the choice. And, I think I just loved skiing more. I'm still to this day, I loved training for fighting and that sort of thing, but it just, miss the people more than anything though. I love the training, but miss the people. The people are some of the greatest people you ever meet.
Yeah, the camaraderie that's so fun.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, you know.
That's what I always say now. I'm like, imagine when I was a kid, if I could go hang out with all my favorite people and we could wrestle every day.
Yeah.
That's like a dream come true. And you can do that as an adult now.
Yeah, totally. You know, and I think in a lot of ways, that's why jiu-jitsu is blowing up so much. Like, you know, it's becoming so popular. And, you know, I think indoor rock climbing is kind of a similar way, you know, that right now that there's a lot of great camaraderie with indoor rock climbing. And that's why rock climbing is blowing up so much. It's a lot of the same feeling of jiu-jitsu. This, like, jiu-jitsu has it a lot more. There's a lot more bonding because you're, you know, like, you're physically in contact with this person. In some ways, you're trying to beat them up, you know, like even your friends, your best of friends, you know, and that's, you know, it builds something that is, you know, special in definitely a way that it's different than even the rest of those things that are also growing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed it when I'll like get into other things and I'm like, oh, this is just like jiu-jitsu for me in a different form.
Yeah.
Like in every other endeavor, you could just take it as far as you want or kind of take it to where you want to and be good with it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but yeah, no, I do miss it. I miss a lot of parts of it, but I don't know, like I said, I just don't know that I ever like loved the actual fighting itself.
Yeah.
I never had that, like, yeah, I mean, you know, Gage, right?
Yeah.
Gage loves to,
he's an animal.
He loves to hurt the other person. Like, he gets joy out of like hurting the other person. Like, I like wanted to win, but I never really, you know, if I could have won without hurting the other guy, I would have. You know,
man,
like,
rolling with him when he's like in a training camp.
Yeah, it's. I mean, he's
like don't think that he's gonna like act like your training partners and friends because he's like there for blood.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I just was never that type of person. Yeah, you know, like, and you know that's why he's still fighting and I'm not in a lot of ways. You know, and
that's
what
like
makes him
50
great.
fights or something.
I don't know about quite that much, but it's a lot. You know,
I swear it's over 40. But yeah, he's an animal.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's wrap it up.
Okay.
Where can people find information about your film, your Instagram?
Yeah, all of it's just my name. If you just search my name, I usually come up, but it's, you know, Columbia River Canoe Project online, Mountain King Industries for the website. And then, yeah, if the Canoe Project's what you want to learn about, it's still Columbia River Canoe Project on social media. My social media is Mountain King 97, but it's, yeah, my name comes up too. So, Robert Lester.
That's awesome, man.
Hell yeah.
Great to meet
Rob.
you.
Hey, it was a pleasure. This
Thanks
was fun.
for being on.
Thank you guys so much. Seriously.